A 35-year-old mother of five named Crystal Rogers vanished from sight during the 4th of July weekend in 2015, leaving her abandoned car on the Bluegrass Parkway in Bardstown, Kentucky. Sherry and Tommy Ballard, Crystal's parents, were devastated and perplexed. Sherry took care of Crystal's children after her disappearance, and Tommy devoted his time to finding his daughter. Police looked into it as well, but they could not find any information about her whereabouts. 16 months later, tragedy struck once more when her father Tommy was shot and killed on November 19, 2016, while hunting on family land close to Bluegrass Parkway. The unsolved disappearance of Rogers and her father's death had a profound effect on the Kentucky community and attracted a lot of media attention. Despite the extensive coverage, investigators were unable to make headway. After 8 agonizing years, a significant breakthrough occurred this year. This case brings us to Bardstown, Kentucky, a town renowned for its rich history, vibrant community spirit, and local legends, which include the renowned Bourbon heritage. It provides a top-notch experience in a small-town environment. Nonetheless, Bardstown is not one of the safest neighborhoods in the nation. Its crime rate is greater than 90% of all Kentucky towns and cities when compared to the state as a whole. The fact that the town has seen 4 unfathomable unsolved tragedies that have permanently damaged the lives of those who live here is another contributing factor. The first tragedy occurred on Memorial Day weekend of 2013, when Jason Ellis, a 33-year-old Bardstown police officer, was ambushed and killed on the Bluegrass Parkway exit ramp. The second occurred on the day after Easter in 2014, when 48-year-old Kathy Netherland and her 16-year-old daughter, Samantha, were brutally murdered inside their home in Botland, just outside Bardstown. Crystal Rogers' murder was the third in this heinous string of killings. Crystal was born April 4, 1980, in Bardstown, Kentucky. She was Sherry and Tommy Ballard's much-loved first child. Growing up in a close-knit family, Crystal's parents loved and looked out for her, being picky about who she spent time with. Crystal had a kind and sympathetic disposition when she was younger, which made people like her. Sherry said that she was incredibly grateful to have Crystal as a daughter and that she could not have asked for a better kid. Initially, Crystal Rogers was wed to Keith Rogers, and the two of them had 4 children. But as time passed, it was clear that their marriage was under strain. Rather than pursuing a formal divorce, Crystal and Keith made the decision to live apart. It is interesting to note that even as they got older, Crystal kept his last name. Later in life, Crystal embraced the joys and responsibilities of motherhood and became a fully committed mother to her children. Crystal started dating Brooks Houck not long after they split up, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. This was a long-term relationship that lasted until 2015. In addition to their romantic relationship, Brooks and Crystal had a working relationship. Coming from a wealthy family with ties to Bardstown, Brooks owned and operated several rental homes in the area. Crystal actively collaborated with him, juggling her job obligations with her 4 children's needs. Along with Brooks, Crystal welcomed Elijah, also known as Eli, a son, into her family. But Crystal's life, which had been marked by her generosity and love for her mother, was about to take a tragic turn. Her 5 children, who had been enriched by their mother's enriching presence, were left with a permanent void in their hearts after her abrupt disappearance. For Crystal, the beginning of July 3, 2015, was just another typical day spent at her boyfriend Brooks's family farm. She watched her children and passed the time by playing games on her phone. Nobody could have predicted how drastically this seemingly ordinary day would affect everyone's lives. When Brooks awoke the following morning, July 4, he discovered with dismay that Crystal had vanished. The 4th of July was marked by barbecues, fireworks, and other traditional festivities, but Crystal was nowhere to be found throughout the day. A relative discovered Crystal's 2007 Chevrolet Impala parked with a flat tire near mile marker 14 of the Bluegrass Parkway 2 days later, on July 5th. The keys were strangely still in the ignition, and her personal cell phone was discovered inside. It was at this point that Crystal's mother, Sherry Ballard, officially reported her missing. The investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance began on July 5, 2015, with Detective John Snow leading the way. Brooks Houck, Crystal's boyfriend and the father of her youngest child, became the focus of the investigation almost immediately. Brooks claimed that he, Crystal, and their son, Eli, went to the family farm on the night of July 3rd. They returned home and went to bed, but when Brooks awoke the next morning, Crystal was gone. He suggested that her habit of leaving in the middle of the night was not uncommon, as she frequently attended parties. However, Crystal's friends and family disputed Brooks' portrayal of her as a frequent partygoer who would abandon her children. Suspicion was aroused by Brooks's uncooperative demeanor during the search. When asked about texts that seemed to show that Crystal was going to spend July 3rd alone without the kids, Brooks said, "I do not know." In the 2 days preceding the car's discovery next to the Bluegrass Parkway, Brooks appeared indifferent and did little to assist, even though Crystal was formally reported missing on July 5. When Detective Snow interviewed Brooks on July 8, he was observed downplaying most of the details and projecting a victim image. The interview was cut short when his brother, Nick Houck, a Bardstown police officer, called. This added a new layer to the investigation. Both brothers were now being investigated by the police. On July 8, the brothers met at the family farm, Crystal's last known location. Nick was questioned and investigated but refused to cooperate. Nick initially refused to take a polygraph test. When forced to take the test on July 24th, the results raised serious concerns. His answers revealed dishonesty whenever asked about Crystal Rogers or the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Despite intense search activity, months went by with no new leads. Due to his lack of cooperation, Bardstown Police Chief Rick McCubbin suspended Nick on September 9, 2015. He was fired on the 16th of October. Crystal's whereabouts remained unknown as the investigation stalled. Finally, the case appeared to be mired in uncertainty. Despite suspicions about Brooks and Nick Houck, no concrete evidence emerged, and Crystal Rogers remained missing, leaving her family and friends in distress as the case seemed to go nowhere. Tommy and Sherry Ballard had a difficult time dealing with their daughter's disappearance. They took on the role of guardians for 3 of Crystal's 5 children, trying to keep things normal for the kids while simultaneously bringing attention to Crystal's situation. Sherry talked to the media about the situation on a regular basis, but Tommy, her father, adopted a more hands-on style. Tommy actively participated in setting up searches, conducting interviews, and requesting information from the sheriff's office. It appeared as though he was conducting an independent inquiry in addition to the formal search for his daughter. He even thought about running for the sheriff's post when things appeared to be slowing down. His goal was to take charge of the unit looking into his daughter's case, and ideally, produce more noticeable outcomes. Soon after Crystal vanished, the Ballard family suspected Brooks and his brother of being involved in a foul play. They publicly implied Brooks's guilt earlier, casting doubt on the veracity of his relationship with Crystal. Tommy and Sherry intensified their legal actions against Brooks in the second half of 2015. They were worried that Brooks would try to leave the area with Eli, who was selling real estate quickly and at an unusually low price. To stop him from leaving, the Ballards took legal action. Aside from this court case, Tommy continued to look for his daughter. He seemed to get a little paranoid in the process. Especially in 2016, he turned into a fervent safety advocate, pushing family members to regularly carry firearms and install security cameras at home. Looking back, it is obvious that Tommy's second significant loss had a profound impact on him. Following the murder of his sister in 1979, and now nearly 40 years later, his daughter vanished. In addition, Tommy confided in his wife, Sherry, that he thought someone was following him. People who knew Tommy well understood his fear of something bad happening to him or his family, especially during the holidays. As the year came to a close, the Ballards filed a legal motion to keep Brooks in the area. They'd also started a lengthy legal battle over Elijah's custody that would last for years to come. Ed Medley, the Nelson County Sheriff, formally declared Crystal Rogers to be most likely dead on October 16, 2015. He identified Brooks Houck, her boyfriend, as the main person to blame for her disappearance. The first arrest in connection with Crystal Rogers' disappearance was made public in December 2015. Danny Singleton, a seasoned worker who was regarded as Brooks Houck's right-hand man, was placed under arrest. Singleton had worked with Crystal and was rumored to be friendly with her. Due to his grand jury testimony earlier in the year, 53-year-old Singleton was arrested on December 16, 2015, on 38 counts of perjury. He was accused by detectives of lying under oath numerous times, and if found guilty, he might receive a long prison sentence. Nevertheless, he was only in prison for 8 months before being released. In 2016, the primary suspect, Brooks Houck, became the center of attention for the Crystal Rogers investigation. The detectives now focused on other family members after expanding their investigation to include his brother Nick. Attention was drawn to a white Buick that had belonged to their grandmother, Anna Whitesides. It was towed to a Kentucky State Police lab for forensic testing because Nick had sold it around the time Crystal vanished. The objective was to locate any evidence, such as DNA or questionable bodily fluids, connected to Crystal. Anna Whitesides, 82, became the focus of the investigation as a result. In June of 2016, she received a grand jury summons to testify. The car may have been used to dispose of a body, cleaned up after, and then sold to obstruct the investigation, the court surmised. Whitesides, however, exercised her Fifth Amendment right and declined to testify. Even though she avoided the grand jury, her property was investigated in August 2016 when Nick Houck's house was searched and Brooks's mother, Rosemary Houck's farm, was also searched. Detective John Snow declared that a thorough search spanning 245 acres, involving more than 30 officials and 18 cadaver dogs, was underway. The extensive search effort and cooperation with multiple law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, did not result in any concrete evidence pertaining to Crystal. The Ballard family was on the verge of yet another tragedy, so the investigation went on. On November 19, 2016, Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, tragically passed away. At 8:00 a.m., the incident happened while he was out hunting on the family's land near the Bluegrass Parkway along Ed Brent Lane with his son and 12-year-old grandson. Although the police initially classified it as a hunting accident, Tommy's wife, Sherry Ballard, insisted it was not. Her husband had been murdered, she thought. Tommy's father, Till Ballard, disclosed Tommy's steadfast determination to locate Crystal. Tommy Ballard was shot in the chest, with the bullet exiting his back, according to a Louisville autopsy. Till Ballard added that his son intended to conduct a thorough search outside of the town during the upcoming week. Trooper Gregory, a police detective, stressed that it was far too early to make any inferences regarding a possible link between Tommy Ballard's death and Crystal Rogers' disappearance. Trooper Gregory then called for prayers and support for the bereaved family, who had already been through a great deal, as the investigation into Tommy's shooting got underway. Sherry Ballard, Crystal's mother, persisted in her legal dispute over Ely's custody. A Nelson County Circuit judge decided in February 2019 that Sherry was not allowed to see Eli until the custody dispute was settled. Even though the investigation was still fruitless, the Ballard family remained optimistic that they would soon receive answers. When the FBI got involved in the Crystal Rogers case in August 2020, they searched the homes of Brooke and Nick, the Crystal storage unit, and the Houck family farm. Following Crystal's disappearance, Brooks's construction company built houses in the Woodland Springs subdivision. On August 27, 2021, a subsequent surge there resulted in the recovery of an item of interest from under a driveway. The FBI asked anyone in Bardstown who knew anything to come forward. In October 2022, the Houck family farm was the subject of a second, multi-day search as part of the investigation. The evidence gathered was sent to the FBI lab in Quantico for analysis. The FBI's involvement demonstrated the ongoing efforts to find the truth in a case that had left Crystal's family feeling confused and in need of explanations. By filing charges against a person who had not been identified before, authorities in the investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance made a significant advancement on June 21, 2023. This new information brought a depth to the long-running investigation that had first highlighted Brooks Houck as a potential suspect in Rogers' disappearance. The arrest also led to an investigation into a 2015 police interview with Brooks Houck, during which an additional person named Stephen Lawson was mentioned. There are rumors circulating that Stephen Lawson is related to someone by the name of Joseph Lawson, which could explain the possible connection and add another level of intrigue to the ongoing investigation. According to court records, 32-year-old Joseph Lawson is accused of conspiring to commit murder and participating in the tampering of physical evidence. Lawson was charged in connection with an incident that occurred over the July 4th weekend in 2015, which also happened to be the time that Rogers was reported missing. During this critical time, Rogers' possessions, including her phone, purse, and keys, were found inside her vehicle on the Bluegrass Parkway. Lawson was specifically charged in the indictment with participating in the destruction, mutilation, concealment, or removal of tangible evidence. Joseph Lawson's arrest raised concerns about the circumstances surrounding Crystal Rogers' disappearance and the nature of Lawson's relationship to the woman who went missing. The details of what happened the night of Rogers' disappearance are still unknown, even after Lawson was arrested, creating holes in the story. On September 27, 2023, Brooks William Houck was taken into custody based on a one-page indictment that included accusations of murder and tampering with tangible evidence related to Crystal Rogers' death in July 2015. According to the unsealed indictment that a circuit court judge unveiled on Wednesday, Brooks was charged with killing Rogers on July 3rd or July 4th, 2015. The document does not, however, contain important information about the manner and location of her death. In a similar vein, Houck's purported tampering with case-related evidence was not explained in the indictment. Federal Bureau of Investigation spokesperson Timothy Beam, who is located in Louisville, verified that Brooks was arrested early on Wednesday in Bardstown. The FBI reports that the arrest was made at a work site without any problems. After being apprehended, Brooks was placed under arrest and placed under a substantial $10 million cash bond at the Nelson County Jail. Additionally, a judge issued an order barring him from communicating in any way with Crystal's family. Brooks was officially charged with Crystal's death at his first Bardstown arraignment on October 5th, following his arrest on September 27th. During the hearing, Special Prosecutor Shane Young stated that they had possession of the gun used to kill Tommy Ballard, which had been purchased from Mick Houck. He also suggested a link between the two homicides. On the other hand, Houck's attorney asked that his sizable $10 million bond be lowered to $500,000 with GPS monitoring. As Brooks awaited his trial for Crystal's murder, the Nelson County judge decided to uphold the initial bond amount. In addition, Elijah's grandmothers, Rosemary Houck and Sherry Ballard, engaged in a separate legal battle over custody of their grandson at the same time. Rosemary Houck has rescinded her custody request, though, following Brooks Houck's arrest. Sherry Ballard and her family, along with Crystal's 5 children, expressed their happiness at the arrest. Residents of Bardstown expressed similar feelings regarding the arrest in the Crystal Rogers case. It is evident that the arrest of Brooks Houck evoked a variety of feelings in both the Bardstown community at large and among those directly involved in the case. Kentucky as a whole, as well as the local community, were greatly impacted by the Crystal Rogers disappearance investigation. Over time, the case engulfed the area, resulting in a great deal of publicity, a lot of interviews, and thorough searches. It seems that the case may have finally found closure after 8 years of agonizing uncertainty. Ten days prior to his disappearance on October 22, 1989, the last known video footage of 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling was captured. This is going to be one of the biggest missing person searches in American history. Last night, while riding his bike with 2 other boys, Jacob Wetterling was kidnapped and held at gunpoint. The FBI believes there may be more evidence that the kidnapper of Jacob Wetterling may have struck in the past. Jared Scheierl was kidnapped and assaulted just 6 days before his 13th birthday in 1989, only 10 miles from Jacob's abduction location. A number of attacks on other young boys in Minnesota, including Jacob Wetterling, will be solved thanks to him decades later, in addition to his own case. In St. Joseph, Minnesota, 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling resides with his parents, Patty and Jerry, as well as his 3 siblings, Trevor, Amy, and Carmen. On October 22, 1989, a cool but not too cold October morning, Jacob and Jerry went fishing before returning in time for the Vikings game to kick off at noon. Watching Vikings football was somewhat of a family ritual. That evening, Jacob's parents traveled about 25 minutes to a friend's house for a dinner party. They had arranged for the kids to stay at home during their absence, as they intended to return later that evening. Dinner had just begun for them. Trevor calls Patty and asks if he, Jacob, Aaron, and the others can ride their bikes to the neighborhood convenience store and rent a movie. The kids keep asking, but Patty says, "No, find something to do. We have got plenty to do." It was beginning to get dark outside. As long as they brought flashlights and returned home immediately after, they were able to persuade Patty and Jerry to allow them to go shopping with their friend Aaron. Given that St. Joseph is typically a very calm place, the Wetterlings believe the kids will be all right as long as they keep an eye out for cars. Jerry answered the phone when it rang, which was about 45 minutes later. "You have to leave that party right now and come home," called their next-door neighbor. When Patty inquired as to whether the children had returned, he said, "Someone took Jacob." After witnessing something terrible, Patty and Jerry are appalled and run home to find Trevor and Aaron in a state of shock. Trevor was simply agitated, and Aaron was hiding in the corner, biting his nails and wanting to disappear. Tearfully, the children describe what transpired. Jacob, Trevor, and Aaron got on their bikes and rode home after purchasing a movie from the store. Aaron, however, abruptly became aware of a noise coming from the roadside. He felt something like a shiver run down his spine, and he saw what appeared to be a gun flash. The children were forced to get off their bikes and into a ditch by a man wearing a mask and brandishing a gun. They initially believed it to be a high school student pulling a practical joke, but they soon discovered the man was truly terrifying. If they did not lay down in the grass and put out their flashlights, he threatened to shoot them. They did as he instructed. He asked Trevor, Aaron, and Jacob to all look at him and tell him how old they were. Trevor was given the order to flee the woods as quickly as possible, or else he would shoot. Trevor was gone in 10 seconds, and he did the same thing with Aaron before telling him to run. Trevor and Aaron ran as fast as they could, knowing the man could decide to shoot them at any time. They turned around, hoping to see Jacob following them, but both Jacob and the attacker had vanished. In a panic, Trevor and Aaron returned home to seek assistance. They made their way to safety, but they were unaware of Jacob's whereabouts or the man's intentions toward him. The Wetterlings are heartbroken and in need of information regarding their son's whereabouts and his captor after hearing Trevor and Aaron's account. Trevor and Aaron provide as much information as they can regarding their assailant. One of the most extensive missing person searches in American history is launched in an attempt to find Jacob. Days go by, and no one is able to locate him. However, the Wetterlings may have their best chance of finding him in the form of Jared Scheierl, a young victim. 9 months prior to Jacob's disappearance, on January 13, 1989, 12-year-old Jared Scheierl was content with his family's life in Cold Spring, Minnesota, a small town located just 10 miles away from the Wetterlings. He and his friends went ice skating that evening. They then purchased malts from a cafe. What had seemed like a normal night soon turned gloomy. Jared approached his friend Corey as the boys prepared to leave for home. They strolled through the small alleyway in the backyard before Jared asked Corey to walk him home, but Corey turned him down. Jared bid farewell and set out on his lonesome walk home. However, his family became anxious when he failed to return on schedule. Nobody knew where Jared was, but his parents saw him running up to the house, upset, almost 2 hours after he said goodbye to his friends. He immediately claimed that he had been attacked and that the attacker was still at large. In order to have any chance of apprehending the man who had injured him, Jared had to relive this horrific experience after his parents had called the police. Jared probably started walking home at 9 o'clock or 9:30 p.m. A car pulled up to him and asked where it should go. He proceeded to direct the man. Grabbing Jared, the man asked him to get into the car after getting out of the vehicle. He declared that he is not scared to use his gun. Jared obeyed the man's instructions and made every effort to live. In an attempt to flee and utilize the information to help apprehend his assailant in the future, he examined the car as much as he could. He saw that the car had a police scanner in it. Jared remained alert, following their every move, even though the man forced him to put his hat over his eyes and lie down in the back seat. The man drove for approximately 15 minutes before turning onto a gravel road and coming to a stop. Fear took hold of Jared as the man walked toward him. The 12-year-old was then molested in the vehicle. When it was all over, Jared was scared and unsure of what the assailant would do to him next. To his surprise, however, the man drove him back to Cold Spring, which is roughly 2 miles away from the Scheierl residence. Returning Jared's snowsuit, he took some of Jared's other clothing, and before letting Jared go, he threatened him. He assured him that while discussing it with others was acceptable, he would track him down and murder him if they managed to uncover his identity. He threatened to shoot Jared if he turned around, so he told him to run. Desperate to escape, Jared ran back home. It is Jared's responsibility to explain what transpired after experiencing an unfathomable attack at such a young age. In an attempt to aid the authorities in apprehending this monster, he provides them with every detail he can recall regarding the car and the man who attacked him. Jared tells them about the police scanner in the car and claims to have been dressed in camouflage. He even gives them directions on the path they took by car. 3 days following Jared's kidnapping, authorities discover a potential culprit. Danny Heinrich, an ex-National Guard member. He has already had burglaries and other run-ins with the law, along with a few DWIs. He also had a police scanner in his car, which an officer discovered during a traffic stop, exactly like Jared had said. Jared recognizes 2 men in a picture lineup who he believes resemble his assailant. Heinrich was one of them. He is unable to identify a single suspect, and the police are unable to press charges. Jared has to go home because he knows the man who attacked him and threatened to kill him is still out there. Jared initially thinks he is the only victim of the man, but he soon discovers there are similarities between the abduction of himself and Jacob Wetterling, which took place in the neighboring town of St. Joseph later that year. Jared thinks he might be the same person, so he wants to do everything in his power to apprehend the offender and help find Jacob. On December 13, 1989, nearly 2 months after Jacob Wetterling vanished, Jared Scheierl collaborates with FBI agents to create a drawing of the attacker. After noticing parallels between Danny Heinrich and the sketch, the FBI brings Heinrich in for questioning 3 days later. They inquire as to his whereabouts on the evenings of the kidnappings of Jacob and Jared. He consents to give them his shoes, a sample of his hair, and his car's tires since he has no other explanation. The resemblance between the tire and shoe prints found at Jacob's kidnapping scene aids law enforcement in obtaining a search warrant. They discover radio scanners, black boots, camouflage pants, and even pictures of young boys inside Heinrich's home. The police, however, allow him to keep the pictures and depart. Almost a year after Jared was attacked, on February 9, 1990, the FBI compares a snowsuit fiber sample with one from Danny Heinrich's vehicle. Based on solid evidence, he is being held for the kidnapping and sexual assault of Jared. FBI profilers assist in organizing the questioning. In an attempt to scare Heinrich and give the impression that they have a ton of evidence, they even cram documents into folders and write his name on them. But the truth is, they require his confession. He is detained in jail for the night, but he refuses to admit anything. The county attorney determines that they must release him because there is insufficient evidence to bring any charges against him. Though they are still unable to provide any solid evidence, suspicion grows and Jacob's family is determined to find him no matter what. Patty has persistently endeavored to maintain Jacob's public persona. She expressed her desire to never have to look Jacob in the eye and explained that she wanted to continue but got tired or that the process was taking too long. She vowed never to give up. Meanwhile, Jared is under increasing pressure. He is determined to provide answers and make the connection between his case and Jacob's. He is frequently pulled out of class by police. Furthermore, despite their best efforts to hide his identity, word quickly got out in the small town that he was the boy who had been molested. Even though he does not know who did it, he is continuously questioned and pressured by the police to confirm it. During one specific interview, the parents were not permitted to enter the room. He was quizzed on his level of certainty regarding the details after being thoroughly briefed on all the pertinent information. He did not have the answers, as much as he wanted to give them in depth. When he eventually started crying, his parents noticed and told the police they were through. In an effort to assist Jared in moving on and regaining his sense of normalcy as a child, his family chooses to leave Cold Spring. They wish to shield him from the mounting strain as well as the assailant, who is still at large. In an attempt to live a more tranquil life, they relocate to Painesville, Minnesota, a short distance away. However, Jared and his family will not learn about the horrors that are already occurring there for more than 20 years. The abduction of Jacob Wetterling and the case of Jared Scheierl have remained unresolved for years. Finding Jacob and apprehending the person who took him seem to be out of the question. However, a discovery made by a blogger more than 20 years after the kidnappings will alter everything. Around 2013, Jared receives a message from Joy Baker. In Painesville, Minnesota, the town Jared and his family moved to after his assault in Cold Spring, only about 20 miles away. She came upon a newspaper article about a string of unsolved kidnappings and assaults of small boys. Multiple reports of a man terrorizing young children in Painesville began in 1986, 3 years prior to the attacks by Jared and Jacob. He would follow children as they strolled or rode their bikes through the town. After grabbing them and asking their age, he would attack them and then release them. It never occurred to the police to apprehend the man or identify him. However, Joy Baker believes there may be a link between those attacks and the kidnappings of Jared and Jacob. Jared is taken aback when Joy speaks to him. He has never heard of these other cases in Painesville before. They sound a lot like his kidnapping to Joy and Jared, and not even the FBI agents had made the connection between the two cases. Jared had believed for decades that he was the only survivor, so when he found out there were others as well, he set out to investigate further. He might be the link that the police need to locate Jacob and bring the attacker's victims, all the young boys and their families, to justice. Jared and Joy carry out more research over the course of the following few years. After many hours of investigation, Jared locates and gets in touch with other survivors. He spoke with one of the victims during the first week and only learned the specifics of his attack. They were at ease conversing with him. They knew who he was, and it had a cascading effect. Ultimately, following the completion of Jared and Joy's work, detectives re-examined Jared's and the Painesville cases. Danny Heinrich, an early suspect who resided in Painesville at the time, provided the authorities with a hair sample. Thanks to technological developments, detectives can now compare the DNA from Heinrich's hair sample and the clothing Jared wore the night of his attack. There is a match. Police now have concrete evidence that Heinrich is the one who attacked Jared, but Jared discovers that he will be unable to charge him with the crime. There are statutes of limitations in Jared's case, and Heinrich is immune from prosecution. That gave Jared the impression that he had worked hard to discover the solution and that, having done so, Heinrich would not face legal consequences. It was unjust to him. Even though Jared's case is not strong enough to convict Heinrich, he still wants to support the other families in need of clarification. Joy and Jared's efforts have allowed police to look into Jacob's disappearance more thoroughly. They obtain a warrant to search Heinrich's residence. They discover child pornographic binders, but no proof of Jacob or the Painesville attacks. April Heinrich is taken into custody on charges of child pornography on July 28, 2015. Even though investigators think he took Jacob, they have not found any solid evidence yet. If Heinrich does not come clean, they might never find out where Jacob is or what happened to him. In their desperation to find the answers, they devise an astonishing bargain for him. In his case, he will not face any charges if he reveals to them where Jacob is. Additionally, all but one of the child pornography charges will be dropped. According to U.S. Attorney Andrew Luger, it is the only way to discover the truth. Additionally, the Wetterlings consent to present Heinrich with the offer. Heinrich accepts the arrangement. After just 10 minutes in court, the prosecutor asks, "Did you kidnap, sexually assault, and kill Jacob Wetterling?" To which he calmly replies, "Yes, I did," and proceeds to describe what transpired when he took Jacob. Heinrich believed that, following the assault, he saw a police car in the area. He shot Jacob out of panic. In addition, he admits to kidnapping and sexually abusing Jared. He takes the police to a location just outside of Painesville's downtown, where he buried Jacob's body. Danny Heinrich's plea agreement prevents him from being charged with Jacob's murder. However, he was given a 20-year prison sentence in 2016 for using child pornography. When he leaves, he will be in his 70s. The awful truth of Jacob's death has now set in. When the families learned the truth about what actually transpired almost 30 years ago, Patty Wetterling claims they almost experience a sense of peace, knowing that Jacob is not in pain. "I want to say, Jacob, I am so sorry," Patty said. "It hurts so much to know what his final days, hours, and minutes were." In order to assist families of missing children, Jacob's parents founded the Jacob Wetterling Foundation, which is currently known as the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. Additionally, they try to pass the Jacob Wetterling Act, which mandates the creation of sex offender registries in each state. In addition to her role as chair of the board for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Patty Wetterling is a well-known advocate who never stops working to defend children and support other families. Had Jared Scheierl not shared his account and collaborated with Joy Baker to secure justice, the Wetterling family might not have been aware of Jacob's fate. The Wetterlings are still close to Jared and Joy today. They were instrumental in providing closure for many families that had been at odds for many years.